Okay, today's video, we're going to talk about doing a joint venture with using a webinar to sell something with somebody in the same industry or parallel industry to you, or somebody that speaks of or is an influencer in your industry, reaching out to them, propositioning them to say, hey, I would like you to host a webinar with me, a live webinar, of which you will bring me in as an expert guest. I will then explain to your audience of the people that are on your email list, who subscribe to your blog, whatever, what are the benefits of using the product or service we have in detail, and then we'll ask them to buy something at the end. I'll give you a cut of all the sales, or I'll give you $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 up front just to put this on. And ultimately, you put that webinar together, you email all the people on that person's list, and you run ads to all the people that are on that person's list through having their email addresses. And with this sets you up as the expert in your field from people that trust now what you're going to say, and it ends up doing very, very well as far as a marketing strategy you can use online. This is a PPC channel, but so I'm going to, of course, talk about PPC here, and you certainly will use PPC to promote a webinar if you're going to do it right, not just email. Email alone is not going to nowhere near scratch the surface on what you want to do with promoting a webinar. But with this, I'm going to explain an offer that we ran in the plastic surgery type space, doing cold sculpting, sorry, which is basically a device that you put on, your leg or your belly, and it kind of melts off fat. Anyway, we did this with somebody in the plastic surgery / beautification type of a niche, and influencer in that niche, and ran a webinar. Our client ran a webinar with somebody in that space, and how well it did. I'm going to go over those numbers here in detail, how well this is ultimately going to work for you if you want to try this out for yourself. So I'll go through the entire strategy of how to set this up if you want to do a joint venture with somebody that is an influencer in your space, or of course this could be just another indirect or even possibly a direct competitor to do the same kind of thing for yourself. I'll go through every step in detail that we followed here and in what you would want to actually do for yourself, and then the results that we got on the example client here, so you can see how well this works. So with that said, we'll get into it. Now, the word joint ventures used to be about sharing your email address or mailing address lists of customers with another company in a parallel industry so they can market to your list of customers or customers you may not be able to convert. So basically, you got a customer list, somebody comes to you, they say they can sell the people that you've done business with, since they know they like your product or services and are willing to pay for it, that they know just from that they could sell their product or service to them too. And with that, generally speaking, it was you would get a cut of all the sales that person would then try to make to your customer list. And then so you would essentially send out an email with some message, if you will, that company would want you to put in front of your email list. But typically it would just go you would say, hey, I ran across this product and it actually looks like a pretty good deal, blah, 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 blah. Here is more about it. And then there's a link to where you could go buy it if you're talking about an email. So basically, essentially, you're just bringing awareness around that product or solution through email. And the same through direct mail or snail mail. They would get your physical list, and they would send out to your list, or they would just give you all the things to send out if you didn't want to reveal your direct mail list itself, your mailing list itself, and then send them out on your behalf. But it would be the same type of message. Hey, this is a cool product or service, you should try it. And based upon how well there's a crossover between your customers, of the people that buy one product would probably be willing to buy the other product, that would actually work or it wouldn't work. There's a new way to do a joint venture now where you could promote things together in the form of a live webinar itself. So you can actually physically sell things together. So you don't just have to access someone's customer list in order to, be able to get access to someone else's customers and sell them your product or service or solution. You can actually run a webinar with that other joint venture partner and be on there together so that you're selling it together. And with that, that's going to be able to sell the best way out of the three basic options I gave you there to do a joint venture, because it's going to be the most it's going to be the most believable, and it's going to have people's guard down the least. Because obviously, if I say, oh, I ran across this product, you should try it, people know about influencers and how people promote certain things like this all the time. But if you're both literally talking on the webinar, it seems more like a natural piece of content that influencer or company is putting out on their own. It doesn't just seem like a sales pitch, which is why I would recommend you do it. And with that, generally speaking, the way that it works is you actually, if you were going to do this with the company, you would actually offer your product or service to that owner of that company. Assuming this would only obviously work if that person could actually make benefit of it. But the idea is you offer it to them. If you have a hair regrowth device that has that you put a helmet on and it shines LED light on your scalp, which I've dealt with a client like this before, you send it to them and you say, you try it and then get the results, and then afterwards we'll do a webinar and we'll have your email list of all the people that you have on your contact list, invite them to a webinar where you and I will be on the webinar, and we'll talk about your results live on the webinar, so that the people that are invited to the webinar think that they're just getting more content that they're used to getting from that person itself. But then obviously while they're on the webinar, you can have your pitch, but it gets, it seems like a more of an organic thing there. But essentially, because they said that they got good results with it and that they're going to be talking about those results, the demand for that webinar is much more greater than saying ultimately, I'm interviewing Bob Smith from the hair regrowth company, and he's going to talk about how to regrow hair using LED light helmets. And that in itself may draw some people, but the fact that the person that you trust has tried it already and vouched for this, it's even more so. That would be the main way that you would go about doing this that's going to be able to really do well for you. And I'm going to give you some examples of this in detail, how this works. But that's a modern version of a joint venture that people are doing now. And you can build an email list that you can essentially send emails out to, send stuff out in the mail to, have remarketing ads show up for. But that a lot of times is just more expensive than tapping into other people's contact lists. There's so many people out there that already have spent years and years and years building up a big fat juicy contact list that knows and trusts them. Why build your own list when you could just tap into their own list and ultimately offer that product or service to them, have them see what it's like, and then have them just recommend it to their audience. That's basically what influencer marketing is, but influencers don't usually run webinars, and you don't need to go through a traditional influencer to do this type of thing. It could be anybody with any contact list out there. It could just be a blog, whatever. But it's generally speaking, you're going to find it cheaper to just proposition somebody else with an email list that they have customers on their list that would basically trust their opinion if they referred you, and then ultimately just give that away and pay them a fee to access their list, so that once they try the product and they like your product, that they can just simply recommend it to their list. Then that would be cheaper than going out and trying it on your own, building the reputation directly. So anyway, how does this actually work? Okay. So the first thing to mention here, if you're going to do this for yourself and what this actually looks like, you're going to find a thought leader in your space. Now again, this could be an indirect or direct competitor, so there's different variations to do this. But essentially, you'll find I would recommend to keep it simple. Find a thought leader in your space, somebody who has some sort of standing in your industry. It could just be a consultant in your industry. Is there a consultant out there who's kind of like everybody kind of knows them in your industry? And then proposition a joint venture with that person. But the key thing being here, the person that you proposition, yes, they need to have a big contact list, and a lot of people have to know about them in your industry, but that they're trusted. Okay, you're borrowing their trust, not just borrowing their list, you're borrowing their trust. So there are certainly, like I said, ways to do a joint venture where you're borrowing someone's list. That's not the new way to do things. You borrow their list and you borrow their trust. But once you got like a consultant or somebody in your industry that people in that industry normally trust, you got them to agree to a joint venture at the surface level. Now you get into the details on how that joint venture would actually go. So normally how this is going to work is you're going to be offering them a flat fee or percentage of sales to this new partner, the consultant, whoever you're using, to host this webinar. So they're going to be the one putting on the webinar. They're hosting it. They're interviewing you on this webinar. And so, like I said, in the old days, it would be a percentage of sales. You could actually do that and say, hey, you put on this webinar, if they believe in your product or service, then they can, would probably then agree to just say, they'll just know at that point that if they offer that to their audience, that they'll just take, it'll sell, they'll take a percentage of the sales, and that'll be good. Other times where they're not quite as confident about your product or service, we'll just say, they'll want a flat fee for putting on that webinar, which is fine, of course, because if your product and you do your homework and their list is right for your products, what difference does it make? But you work out the payment, because nobody's going to be doing this for free. I don't care how good it is. People don't put on webinars for people for free. We'll just leave it at that. Certain influencers out there already do this. This has been, been popular for a while. You just don't hear about it because it's not transparent that it's out there. There's not a whole lot of people doing it, but there is quite a few people. But there's certain influencers that will already have terms worked out already on how much to do a joint webinar with you, carved out, and then of course you'll just go with that fee. In our space, in the marketing space, there's marketing blogs like Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, Search Engine Journal being one, where they'll, if you contact Search Engine Journal and get under their media kit and their advertising options, they have joint webinar there as a direct way to advertise with them. So it's just exactly what I'm talking about here. They put on the webinar, they put basically a webinar every week on, and you have to pay like $5,000 to be on that webinar. So they're just selling their influence, if you will. And so if I offered a webinar on my own, yeah, I'd get some people to go, but basically it's people that already know me already. And I'd get a few, but I'm not going to be able to get crazy numbers because they have a list that's, 50 times the size of my email list. And I could go out and try to run a webinar to people who don't know about me, but people that don't know the person that's hosting the webinar get very poor numbers. A lot of people don't know this when they're starting out. Webinars are for people that already know who you are because they already trust and respect your opinion. They're not this isn't like a for sure thing, but an exception would be if they're looking for a specific solution and then you hit them with an offer with a webinar that offers them information about that exact solution. That would be an exception. But if you're going to try to, in the marketing industry, if I'm going to go out there and put a webinar together for people who are interested in marketing, they're not going to, basically take me up on that offer to join the webinar because they're committing an hour at a time. They're not going to be able to do that or not want to be able to do that with a person who they don't really know yet. Because how do they even know that what I'm saying is even true or correct or I'm full of shit or not? So the webinar generally comes into play as you're talking about not a one-to-one direct match where I need exactly this answer and you're presenting me a webinar that gives me the exact answer. You go and you watch a webinar from somebody you trust and respect already to get access to new ideas. Okay, so anyway, as far as there's different places out there that offer a paid webinar. You pay so much money for. There might be a magazine or major publication in your space that already does this, and they have a fee already that you'd pay. And it all just comes down to numbers. You do that webinar, you see what your sales come out. If it's good, you can keep repeating it and doing it in other places or whatnot. But the bigger publications will generally have a cut and dry way for you to do a joint webinar with them, whereas the smaller people with the smaller lists won't have it, so you have to negotiate it. But realistically, it's the smaller places that are going to be the better opportunity for you, because they're not going to know how to value this as much as the big companies. Like I told you, Search Engine Journal was one, they charged $5,000 minimum for a webinar spot, because they know what it's worth. They know what people are willing to pay for it. Whereas these little guys, this is the first time they've ever heard this, you might be able to get by with saying, hey, you do a joint webinar with me for $500, they'll do it. Or $1,000, they'll do it. So anyway, you got to negotiate the terms. Third, plan out the webinar to teach users how to fix one problem at least 1% of the people on the list have and would pay to ultimately fix. So this goes back to my 1% rule. Anytime you're doing any like online advertising, whoever you're contacting, you got to be able to say to yourself, at least 1% of these people, if they're presented my solution, would actually want to buy my product or service. And if you can't say that, go find another place to advertise online. Online, there's so many avenues to advertise out there. You don't have to settle for advertising and do a shotgun blast approach to what you're doing, because ultimately the lesser percentage of people that would buy your product or service on the list you're targeting, the higher your acquisition cost per customer is going to be. So you want to refine as much as you can, and everybody wants one place to advertise where they're going to get all their customers, and that's tough to do. Really tough to do in a lot of niche markets. You got to be able to do something here, and then here, and here, and then when you add all these different promotions up, you got the big result that you want. But you can't just do one place and call it good. And so anyway, as it comes to this, is the same thing. You need to be able to find a list to get access to, where those people on the list, probably 1% of the people would actually want your product or service if they just knew about it. That's your basically your goal. And with that though, tied to that, whatever you're going to make the webinar topic about, you want the people that are on that list to also say, I wanted to answer that exact problem. So your topic idea and your product or service has to be kind of like in demand by at least 1% of the people, at least, to say that if they saw it, they would really, really jump on that immediately. That's what your goal is. So if you're selling a hair regrowth product, of course, you're going to want to get in front of somebody who talks about hair regrowth, set up a webinar with them, have them try the product, then have a webinar explaining how that influencer tried the product and that they liked it so much that they wanted to bring on the CEO from that company to talk more about the product and how you can regrow hair at any age, regardless of how bald you may be. And that would basically be the topic of your webinar. But that would be the kind of setup that you would have here. And the people on that list, at least 1% of people will really strongly gravitate towards wanting to be on that webinar if that title itself was presented in an ad, which we're going to have in the next step. So with that said, once you got the title carved out, you're going to put your ads and landing pages together and everything to get people to that webinar. Essentially, I would, of course, if you don't know about, there's recorded webinars, live webinars. We're talking about a live webinar here. You're going to use the email list that person has that you set up the joint venture with. You're going to blast that email out several times to their list. You're going to negotiate at least 3 to 5 emails are going to be sent out in series to try to get people onto that webinar. And you're going to have to A lot of people you contact will be able to write an email good for this, but for all practical purposes, you're going to have to present to them the exact email to send out. You're going to have, like I said, you're going to try to send the product or service to the person that is hosting the webinar to try it and then hear their feedback and then write the email and write it in a way kind of like I told you. Oh, that I tried this XYZ product. It was so great that I wanted to actually put a webinar together for you guys and bring on the owner of this company so he can explain to you what this product is about. And then, this webinar will cover how you will be able to regrow hair at any age, how this is a non-surgical procedure, blah, 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 and then a link to the webinar sign-up page itself. That will be the email. And you want to have your PPC ads be similar. So with that, you'll run display ads. You'll get that person's email address list that they are going to send the emails out to for this, to invite people to this webinar. You're going to upload it to Facebook, and if you've spent $50,000 or more on Google Ads lifetime, you're going to upload it to Google because you're going to allow to run display ads to an email marketing list that way. And then you're going to also take that, or if you haven't spent 50 grand or more lifetime on Google Ads, you're going to upload that email list to AdRoll, because they'll let you run ads on the general, on the millions of websites out there that have banner ads running on them to kind of replace what you could do through Google Display Network. And those email address lists will then let you get in front of all these people that are on this email address with banner ads on what websites they go to, news sites, game sites, whatever they go to, plus also on Facebook, since so many people are on Facebook. And you're going to be able to ask, 100 different times, essentially, each person if they'd like to go to this webinar. And on the ad is going to have the same kind of tone as I just described as the email. The main thing is you're going to put the likeness and branding from that person who's hosting the webinar that you're partnering with on the landing pages and ads. So it should have the same branding and look that all the rest of the material that person you're partnering up with should be on that ad, so that when they see the ad, they automatically think by seeing that ad that this ad is from the person who you're partnering with, not you. You put a picture of their face, you can put a picture of your product or whatever on there on the ad, and then say, doing a webinar for this great product I tried, click here. That's essentially, you got it on a banner ad, got to keep it short and simple, but essentially that's what you're going to do. And then if they're interested that far, because you're just piquing interest on an ad, you get them to the landing page, and then on the landing page you pretty much are going to then go into detail what this thing is about there. And then the landing page itself is essentially going to just be what I mentioned you're going to do on the email. Hey guys, I'm putting on a webinar to go over this great solution that I tried to regrow my hair. It worked so great. I wanted to be able to share with you this information about how it went, and I contacted the company. The owner said he would be on the webinar with me, so I just would like, if you want to know about how things have went and the results we're getting and how this works, join our webinar. That's essentially what the webinar landing page is. And so, again, the landing page is going to have the look and feel of that person you're partnering with, their coloring scheme, their all their branding, all of that stuff. So it looks like their webinar. Again, for this to work, really well, it should look like they're just inviting you randomly. This is their webinar, because otherwise it's going to look like a paid promotion. You don't want that, which it is obviously, but as soon as people think it's a paid promotion, then they're going to be too skeptical. So, and that's why this works so good. You're basically getting a free paid recommendation from somebody who basically anything that that person says, there are people that follow them will do. So it's way better than any other display advertising you could do for your own company, no matter what you said, because it's instantly going to be believed and trusted. And it's better than having an influencer post something, because ultimately you have the longer format, because once somebody's on, the reason why webinars work so good is because once you're on a webinar so far and so long, you're going to feel like you've wasted your time if you don't go ahead and purchase this product or do something by the end of the webinar. which is why it's the consistency and commitment principle in user psychology. And so if you say something in 5 minutes, they're more apt to just leave and say that oh well. But if they spend an hour, they're gonna feel like they're not getting their hour back. They should probably go ahead with the recommendation more. It's just how it's a psychology trick. That's why people mainly put on webinars. But just for a webinar, just for an influencer on social media to say, I tried this product, it's great, that's okay. That certainly is good, but not nearly as good as getting them on a webinar locked in, giving them a 45-minute pitch so they can hear everything about this product, and then feel like, again, that if they leave, that they wasted an hour of their time, essentially. Tied in with this, by the way, you also are going to do a discount that's specific. The person being interviewed on this webinar or invited on this webinar are going to offer a 20% or 10% discount just for the people of this webinar. So it gives people a reason that they actually want to buy it now. Because if people start procrastinating and say they're going to come back later and buy, you're going to lose a high percentage of your sales. So you set everything up so that you're being interviewed by somebody that these people that are on the webinar trust, and then they hear all the benefits about this product or service, and at the end of the webinar, they're hearing that you're going to give them 10 or 20% off your product just because you're a nice guy or you're a nice gal, but it's only going to work if you use this within the next 24 hours. And then that gets people the rest of the way pushed or off the fence and to where they'll actually purchase from you and they won't delay. And that's how the whole entire funnel set up. So you give the person the product, they try it, they invite people to hear their experience on the webinar, of which you're inviting a guest on that webinar, which is you. They talk about their experience. Then the later part of the webinar, you start talking about why the product or service gets these kind of results and it works so good, and that you'll give them 20% off if they want to try this product today. That's the whole funnel right there. So you'll blast out the emails, then you'll run Facebook ads, display ads on the web to drive them to a landing page that looks as if that person you're partnering with put on. Even though that landing page will have all their branding, you also want to be the one putting that landing page together so they don't screw it up. The average person doesn't know how to make a landing page. So you want to, if you don't know how to make a landing page, go look at other webinar landing pages. Go look at 100 of them and try to distill them down. What's the main things that are the same about them? Or contact our firm. We'll get you a killer landing page for this. But with that, you want to put the landing page together so that you're putting the email together, you're putting the banner ads together, you're putting the landing page together, and you're facilitating everything for them. So when you pitch this person that you want to access their list, you're saying, I will give you money to run this webinar, and everything that we need, the banners, everything we need to promote it, everything we need to put on, I will do everything. All you got to do is simply let me email your customer list with the email that we create for you. Let us remarket or market to your email list and be there for the webinar, which the webinar will last an hour. So really all that they got to do that's costing them time and effort and money, of course they're risking their reputation, but if that's where giving them your product or service up front to try for free comes in handy. Maybe they don't like it, we'll just move on to the next opportunity. But beyond, they got to spend an hour of their time on the webinar, and that's it. So if you come to them and say, I'll give you $500 to host a webinar, and all you got to do is be on the webinar, a lot of people will take it. For these smaller guys that only have a few thousand people on their email list, $500, hey, that's an extra $500 that they didn't have before. That is only going to take them an hour of their time. Sure, they'll do it. Of course, if they have 30,000 people on their list, they might want $5,000 or whatever. But you get the general idea. But you're going to do because if you get them to need to do the work themselves, they'll drag their feet on it and it'll take forever 2, they won't do it right. The marketing done right needs to be done by marketing experts, and they're not going to hire experts to write your email copy, make your ads, make your landing page. You have to actually do all this yourself. That's going to be if there is a downside to all this, the downside of all this. You're going to have to put all the marketing material together for basically one thing where you're only going to get one shot at their email list, if you will. What a lot of people do that recommend doing webinars is once the webinar is done, they'll record that webinar and then use ads to send people back to the recorded webinar to watch it again. You can certainly do that. And of course, beyond that, once they watch the webinar, you can have remarketing ads show up for people to try to get them back to your site to purchase that product or service. You can also do that to really bring out the value on this thing. But you'll have to put an entire funnel together. Yes, it takes a ton of work just for one shot at a list of people that might only be 5,000 people. But if you get it to work, there's 100 people that you could do the same deal with probably in your space if it's a fairly large niche that you're in. And even if it's not, of course, maybe it's still worth it for you anyway. Ultimately, to know how well this works, I mentioned that I was going to give an example of how this works. Worked in the cool sculpting space, where it's a device that you put on your belly or your leg. It basically melts off the fat, takes off 10, 20, 30% of the fat on wherever you place it on your body, and it's done in a plastic surgery type center that generally does this, not always, but generally speaking. And so what we did in their situation is, of course, if you're doing this, or we're doing this, you're going to be running Google ads for this already. You're going to run Bing ads, people that are ready to buy this, you're tapping into that. Once you've already done that, you need more people than that. You're going to have to figure out how to, do display advertising. Before you go out and try to convince the random public out there about doing this, and even people that have searched for it in the recent last 30 days, you can do display ads on Google Display Network for people who've searched for it in the past, or people perhaps that search for a competitor that specializes in that, which in this space you couldn't necessarily do that. You're going to go to somebody who already has the trust and attention of the people that you want to sell it to and normally would buy it, i.e. people who buy other expensive cosmetic procedures like collagen lip fillers / injections, Botox, all this stuff where they're already spending thousands of dollars a year on cosmetic surgery. They got money, they know they want to spend. So that's always the holy grail in trying to do, when you're not talking about search engine advertising anymore, you're talking about doing display advertising. You want people who have the money to buy, and people who are willing to buy before you market to them. Because if you do that, most of your hard work of figuring out who to market to then is over with. And so before going out there and, you could target people who go to a plastic surgeon's website, but that's going to be kind of slim pickings. And even if you do, plastic surgeons offer a bunch of services. And even then, you're a random plastic surgery place that offers something in which, why should they trust you when they trust their other doctor already? So for all these different reasons, in a market like what I'm talking about here, the plastic surgery and cool sculpting, you would want to actually get somebody who's already trusted in the space to recommend you. And of course, like I said, you can do influencers to recommend your service. But for something that's expensive as this, and as technical as this, a better option would just to get people into a webinar, which is what we did, what I recommended here. This particular, so we had a person that was just an influencer that we dealt with in this space. Like I said, you could do a consultant in your space that has a lot of contacts. If you're doing like business to business selling, you could do somebody who sells an indirect, somebody who sells another product, which if they bought that product, they'd buy your product. There's a lot of ways you can do this. We went directly after an influencer. We propositioned this influencer who talks about plastic surgery and other cosmetic procedures. And we got them, we did what I was just explaining to you today, where we proposition them, hey, we want to be able to have you do a joint venture webinar with us. We will put all the materials together. All you need to do is, you could come in for a free treatment at one of our centers, because this is a place that has centers all over across the country, which if you were to do, you could still do this locally. You would just need to be able to, of course, get an influencer or somebody who has a list that's local to your area for it to work. This place, or in this case, we didn't need to, because they had 20 plus centers across most of the main metropolitan areas across the U.S. And anyway, with that said, we'll put together all the materials. We'll let you come in, like I was saying before, and get the cool sculpting done. You can, comment whether or not you like this or not. If it's all good, you do like the service, we'd like to be able to have you recommend this to your audience, but not, just by making a post on social media. We'd like to actually do a webinar with us where we can actually get the people we want to sell to in a long form selling format here. And you'll talk about your experience. Then we'll talk about why cool sculpting works so well. And we'll try to sell them and give them a discount at the end of the end of the webinar, and see if this will work out for us. And if it works, maybe we'll do other ventures in the future, and so forth. And they agreed with this, and these are typical type of numbers that you'll kind of see from a webinar if you run one in general anyway, to a warm list. So if you had your own email list, these are kind of similar numbers what you would get running a webinar to people you already know. We're tapping into people, a list of people that they already know, that they already have the emails for. Smart influencers, by the way, get access to email addresses, because if you don't have email addresses, you can't sell joint webinar stuff like this. So they had 3,400 plus email addresses, and with that, I have a list of about 3,400 and change email addresses. We went out there and did what I mentioned here, what you're going to do. You're going to send a series of emails. You're going to go advertise on Facebook and on Google Display Network / ad roll. In this particular case, we had to do ad roll and we had to do Facebook, because we didn't have a $50,000 lifetime spend on Google Ads yet. With that said, of the 3,400 plus email address list that we had, 84 registered to the webinar itself, that they said that from the landing page that they would come to the webinar. Of that, which is very typical when you run webinars, 36 actually showed up to the webinar, to be on the live webinar itself. Of the 36 that showed up, we had 3 clients here. So it was less than 10% of the people that were willing to do it. Okay, but for a product that's $3,000 plus for a treatment, this is actually very good numbers. Okay, what were the costs in order to do this though? So in order to get an influencer with a list over 3,400 names long, we had to negotiate and have paid them a $2,000 flat fee just to do the whole webinar for us, to get access to the list, get on the webinar. We didn't offer any other spiffs or commissions on the sales. If I were to do this one again, knowing what I know now, I would actually offer a flat fee and a percentage, because that'll get them to be their best and their brightest on the webinar, and really, really sell and have high emotion on that webinar, because that's going to get you more sales. What we should have did was $2K flat fee plus 5% on the lifetime sales of all the people who came through that webinar. So in the future, if anybody comes back to them, they're of course going to recommend them back to the center, but it'll get a better pitch for them. Well, anyway, without that, with just offering them a flat fee, which I didn't talk about this before, I skimmed over it, but flat fee is generally going to be the best because it's just cleaner that way. If you find out it works, flat fee is going to get you the least cost, because people would rather have money up front and no risk. So if they want no risk, you can negotiate instead of $2,000, maybe $1,000. Whereas if you had to pay a percentage, you obviously know you would pay much higher. So, or if, for yourself, if you're more skeptical up front, you could try to negotiate a percentage only thing. It's going to be harder to do, certainly, but obviously aren't going to risk as much. But basically speaking, with all the time and effort it takes to set up the landing page and the ads and the email copy and doing the webinar, the cost of what you have to pay to get them to host the webinar and get access to the list is really minor in comparison. So with all that said, you're probably going to be better off offering a flat fee than a percentage. You're going to end up paying less money. But anyway, for a list of like 3,000 plus, I'm going to be paying $2,000 at most for the joint venture webinar. And that's only because we're selling something that's so expensive. We can get away with it. Otherwise, I'm going to be doing $500 to $1,000 for a joint webinar for a list of about 3,000 people. And then it will go up there based upon what niche it is, of course, and then the size of the list. But we had to pay them $2,000 to put on the whole thing and be on the webinar. And then $572 total cost between ad roll and Facebook to run the ads for that part of it to get people to the landing page itself. So in other words, about $2,570 in total marketing cost to get 3 paid clients, which they're spending about $3,000 each for the cool sculpting, but they can come back. So, and that's about $9,000 in revenue for about $2,500 in sales, which a plastic surgeon, you're kind of spoiled. Anybody in the medical space, they want usually a 10-to-1 return on their money. But when you get to follow-up, you're already at that 10-to-1, because generally speaking, they're not just going to get it once done. They're going to get it done multiple times, multiple areas, multiple times. And with that, the average customer, that's where going into your books comes into handy. You go into your books, you find out what's the average amount of times a new customer comes in to get this treatment done. Overall, on an average, the average customer who comes in and gets this done is going to be 2 to 3 times. So instead of $9,000, you're at about $22,000, $23,000 for something that basically costs, roughly $2,500 to put on. Now you're at a 10-to-1 return. It takes a little while to get that money recuperated, but you got to be thinking about lifetime value to make these numbers work a lot of times. So you may be saying, well, I don't see how this is going to work for something that I sell that's not $3,000. Like I said, you may certainly be depending on the niche, you may have to certainly pay a lot less to get this deal done. If it's a mommy blogger, you may be able to get access to 10,000 names for $1,000. So what I would try to do is run some, math on the back of a napkin here and figure out about how many sales you need. The numbers that'll stay fairly consistent here is, of the registrations that you get, it should not cost more than $10, $20, $30 at the very, very most for a webinar registration. If you're in some spaces, you'll be able to get a registration for $3 to $10 somewhere. But you can kind of estimate maybe $10 a registrant to get them on the webinar. Okay, from there you should be able to close, but it depends, 5 to 20% of the people on the webinar, depending on how expensive that product is. So with those basic numbers there, you can kind of do the math as to what you think you should be able to get away with paying. Of course, you want to pay as little as possible, but at least then you're not going to way overshoot it. You're going to know what's way not going to work in terms of what you can pay the influencer, competitor, whoever you're working with to get access to the list and do a joint venture with, and still have the math work out to where you're making money at the end of the day from this. I will admit that selling candles here for $10 a pop, that probably is not going to work with this general model here. There's not enough money that you can offer the influencer to get excited about taking an hour of their time and being on a webinar, that the math is going to work out to where you're going to come out ahead too at the same time. So that anything where you're selling something for a few $100s at the very, very minimum to, if you're selling anywhere up to $100K and in terms of what the cost of the product or service, or the total lifetime value from the customer, it works great. So anybody who's selling anything for 5 figures, you should really look at doing this. 4 figures, maybe. 3 figures, maybe. So the more you're selling for, the more you're going to be able to make this work. But at the same time, the cheaper the cost of the product or service, the higher closing rate is going to be on the webinar itself. So at the end of the day, you may run something like this. You find out that you didn't quite make what you wanted to make. You could come back to that person again later, or go to a similar person and offer them, maybe you have to offer half as much. And maybe they'll take it, maybe they won't. So like you run PPC ads that I talk about all the time on this channel, PPC is not a matter if you'll make money, it's when. You got to figure out when you run ads, where's the 80% of what you did that didn't work, so you can cut it out, and then you'll basically probably make money after all of that. You just need data to figure out what parts of what you did work, so you can focus on that. This isn't got so many different levers to pull with it, but putting it on, you can kind of basically see what you can pull from a certain size initial list. And with that, then you'll know about what you can pay to get access to that list once you've ran one. And then obviously if you are successful on one, you can do this how many more times. This might be what you do for all your acquisition from now on, just going and pitching other people and getting access to the list. You may not need to develop a list on your own, other than once you get a customer, you have your own customer list. But to contact the general public to get them on a webinar, you may not have to do it at all. And probably, ultimately, like I said, almost all of you guys would be better off contacting somebody who already has a list and just tapping into their list and making your own list. If you're not offering something that's not, amazing, if you have a boring product or service, tapping into someone's list and using the power of their recommendation is going to be easier than going out there and building your own list from a cold traffic and all that. So anyway, that is everything I wanted to share about this strategy here today, about doing joint ventures, using a webinar, how to actually structure this, gave you an example of how it would work, and other stuff that's going out there in the market. If you have any questions about this strategy, let me know. Leave me a comment below, and I'll get back to everybody who leaves me a comment asking me questions about how to do this, or things that you think I should have covered and didn't. If you like this video, I would consider giving it a thumbs up, and consider subscribing, as I have a lot of other videos on this channel about other PPC money making strategies that can make you a lot of money as well. Stuff that we're doing at our PPC firm here at Guaranteed PPC. We're testing all the time different strategies and bringing to you here on a silver platter stuff that is working for us, that makes money. We show you the real numbers, and you don't have to test stuff out on your own. You can learn enough from this channel alone and with what we're testing to be great at PPC and make millions of dollars basically with your PPC campaigns for your business. So, and we of course share with you the stuff that doesn't work, so you can stay away from that as well. It's the best information on YouTube as far as I know of actual actionable advice on how to do PPC and make money with it. I also, by the way, have a blog at guaranteedppc.com/blog, where we give step-by-step advice on how to set up PPC campaigns to guarantee our clients' results. If you want more detailed information on how to do PPC the way that we're doing it here at our agency, you can find great supplemental information authored by myself there as well. The final thing I want to mention on this video before I end it here is to let you know that I have a brand new program at our PPC agency where we offer turnkey PPC campaigns. To where if you were to start up a new business in a new industry, chances are we have a campaign that's already been ran at our agency before, which we know the numbers that you can get from Google ads or Facebook ads in that market, in which if you wanted to get those results for yourself, you could actually get the campaign templates and landing pages and everything that we use for that industry for your startup. Or maybe we got something that's already been done in your industry before, and we actually sell/lease out those campaigns. So you don't have to learn all the stuff that we're teaching you on this channel. You can just use whatever works, and we know the results from at our agency because we've done business in that market before. And the reason why we can do that is because, generally speaking, whatever's done in one market that's not in conflict with another geographic market, we can, obviously offer the same results there. So in a lot of service markets, local businesses, they're doing business in one market, you can start up the same campaign in another market and you would not cross paths. Or we'll have a business in one country, you're in another country, and you can use the same thing that's working in one country in another, or even more so. So anyway, if you're interested in that type of thing, to know what we have as far as campaigns and what results we can offer, reach out to our agency at Guaranteed PPC. We'll let you know what we have to offer. So with that said, I'll wrap it up. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned a lot. Hope to see you in my next video where I have another great strategy for you there. See you later.